I'm Tim Monroe, and this is what I really want to talk about. Everyone has a passion and a story to tell, something that lights them up. On this show, we talk to fascinating people about the things that really matter to them and to all of us. Sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's deep. Every time, we learn something new. It's what I really want to talk about. And if you want to be part of this ongoing conversation, let me know. My email is tsmonroe001@gmail.com. My guest today is Dr. Madeline Rogers. Originally from El Dorado, Illinois, Madeline earned a Master of Music from Indiana University Jacobs School of Music as a student of Andre Watts, and a doctorate in musical arts from the University of Nebraska with Dr. Paul Barnes. Rogers is an accomplished solo and collaborative performer in the U.S. and abroad. She is a virtuosic concert pianist. Rogers is a recurring scholar at Brahms Baden-Baden, Germany, where she researched the music of Brahms and performed recitals in 2022 and 2024. Other significant international performances include solo and collaborative recitals in England, Spain, Italy, Vietnam, and Argentina. A proponent of living composers, Rogers has worked closely with Victoria Bond to revive a piano concerto that was last performed in 1997 and was the first to premiere the two-piano version of the concerto in 2021. Her latest research is on H. Leslie Adams, whom she interviewed extensively to revive and edit his Empire Sonata for horn and piano from 1960. Rogers previously taught applied and collaborative piano as an artist faculty member at the Omaha Conservatory of Music and is currently assistant professor of keyboard studies at Berea College, where she performs beautifully at just about every ceremony or event. Welcome, Dr. Rogers. What do you really want to talk about today?
Well, if it's not obvious, I'd love to talk about music.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
You want to narrow that down a little bit for us?
Well, yeah, I think everyone has a bit of a misconception about classical musicians. Mm-hmm. I mean, yes, we can be a little nerdy. I'm not saying that I'm exempt from that, but I think there have been some really beautiful attempts in recent years to dive into some unknown parts of classical music, to revive pieces that have never been heard before. And even when I was studying classical music as a student, I didn't know that these possibilities existed. Yeah. So for me, it's been an exciting journey to discover a new side of classical music and to be able to present that to the community. Yeah. And kind of, it's revitalized my interest in my own field. And so I think kind of breaking down some stereotypes of classical music, that it's not inaccessible or stuffy or for an elite group of people, but it's actually telling a lot of stories of a lot of people.
Okay. And I think too, like when we were sort of sending notes back and forth about this conversation, you mentioned a couple things that I think maybe we can also dive into if you
of course, mind. Yeah.
One is you talked about the role of music in faith.
Yes.
And also in community.
Yes.
And those two things are kind of a big deal around here, I think.
Absolutely.
So if we'll kind of shoehorn that in as we go.
I can't wait.
Yeah. Okay. But let's start at the beginning.
Yeah.
So you are from what we Chicagoans would call downstate Illinois.
Deep South Illinois.
Deep South Illinois, probably as pretty far south as you can go, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. So tell us about your personal and especially musical journey from, growing up there to sort of what you're doing now.
Sure. Yeah, as you said, I come from pretty much as far away from Chicago as humanly possible. I grew up about an hour north of Paducah, Kentucky, so I've always had kind of a special affinity for Kentucky because that's really right across the river from where my ancestors are buried on a bluff overlooking the Ohio. So I've always been connected to this region and kind of the heart of Kentucky. And so when I got this job, I was really happy. It felt like coming home. Yeah. But yeah, my parents are obviously a huge part of my upbringing. They both played music in high school. Okay. But my dad was military full-time. Mm-hmm. And my mom stayed home to educate my sister and I. And when I was 3 years old, she signed me up for piano lessons because she knew the importance of music, and she also thought it would help me to be better at math. And it didn't work. I'm still bad at math, yeah. And I chose music to avoid math as much as possible. So in that way, it wasn't successful, but it turned me into a path that eventually became my career. So I'm very blessed by that.
Right.
Yeah, but she used to drive over an hour to find a someone who would teach me because it's such a rural area. It's really, especially when I was growing up, there weren't all that many teachers around.
Yeah.
A lot of farmland, a lot of agriculture, but not a whole lot of places to listen to classical music or learn about classical music. So she used to drive to Carbondale, which is where Southern Illinois University is.
Yeah.
So that's where I grew up taking lessons. And then when I was a teenager, I was right next to a community college, and they reached out to me. I would do like theater with them in the summers, and so I was like loosely connected with it as a kid. And the music director there found out I played the piano, and when I was still a teenager, they came up to me and was like, "Hey, we need a pianist for our choir, and we don't have anyone else that plays the piano. Can you start taking some college classes so that we can get you as an accompanist?" And so that's how I started college.
Wow.
So I kind of just slid into
How old were you?
music. I was 13. I turned 14 that semester.
Yeah.
And thankfully it worked out because I was homeschooled, so I was able to do some dual credit.
Right.
And it was an amazing opportunity. And to be able to start my musical journey in college as a collaborative pianist, as someone who is accompanying a choir, like it immediately instilled in me that music is supposed to be something for the community. It's for people to do together. And you can contrast that with how classical piano is studied in undergrad, which is very isolated, very lock yourself in a practice room for 6 hours and come out when you're ready to play.
Right.
But I think I always had that sense of music is meant to be shared. Music is supposed to be played with other people. And that was really formative for me as part of my upbringing.
Yeah. So when you were young and taking piano lessons, you said starting at age 3.
Yeah.
Somewhere along the line there, did you realize, or did maybe your parents or a teacher realize, wow, this kid's got something? Like, was there, because most kids, like I took piano lessons when I was a kid, and it was very clear very early on that, well, he's not going to be Beethoven, right? I mean, so like, but at some point there must have been, this kid knows what she's doing, or she's got some talent, right? Yeah.
Well, for me to be able to go to the college and start taking, that was a confidence boost for me as kind of still a young teenager at that point. But I think I always enjoyed it, and I wouldn't say I was necessarily too big for my britches, but at that time, I was kind of a big fish in a little pond because there wasn't many people that played piano in my area. I also got my first job working at a church. As soon as I got my driver's license, I got a music director position in Harrisburg, Illinois at a Presbyterian church. Yeah. And so it was just another way for me to gain experience and to work hard. And I started teaching neighborhood kids piano when I was 12 for $6.50 a lesson. So, amazing. It was just
You hear stories like
fun.
that. So, I mean, you and I know E.J. Stokes well, who runs the African Music Ensemble here.
Yeah.
He told me that when he started directing the children's choir at his church when he was 9.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they just pushed him out front and said, you're in charge of all these kids.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It happens a lot, actually.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. So it was clear from pretty early on that this was going to be a big part of your life. Right?
A big part of my life. I wouldn't say that it was necessarily clear that I wanted it to be a career. I think that started in when I was around 14 and already taking college classes. And at that time, I kind of, I was very blessed to have good mentors, even at the community college level, people who kind of had a sense of the music world. When I was little, I'm sure I dreamed of like being a concert pianist and touring the world and doing that sort of thing. Yeah. But to live that lifestyle, it takes such a huge amount of dedication at an even younger age that by the time I started college and wanted to be a music major, I had kind of like missed the boat to be the next like Yu Jia Wang or something like this,
Okay.
But what I did know is that I loved playing.
Yeah.
I loved teaching because I was already teaching at that age.
Right.
At that time, I was like, I like teaching, but I don't really want to teach kids. And so in speaking with some of my mentors and my college professors, they were like, well, have you considered being a college professor of music? Yeah. And when I was about 14, I kind of went through the soul-searching phase of what do I want to do with my life? And I thought, that's what I want to do with my life.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So when did you start college?
The year?
Were you young?
I was 13 when I started those. Yeah.
College? Mm-hmm. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
That explains a lot, Madeline, actually. I asked you earlier before we went on the air how old you were, and you told me, and it's very young, and so that explains a lot. Okay, so talk about that a little bit. That must have been tough. I mean, a 13-year-old thrust into the... Did you live on campus? What was it like socially for you?
It was actually a really great experience.
Okay.
I mean, the community college where I went for the first 2 years for my associate's degree was dual credit.
Okay.
And
you were living at home.
I was living at home.
Okay.
Yeah, my mom drove me to college.
Yeah.
I actually started taking driver's ed when I was 15 and still taking college classes. So I would have to share the driver's ed car, and drive myself to college and have the other high schooler drop me off. It was very interesting. Yeah. But no, I was really blessed with a community. I think the thing about music, and I'm sure some places aren't like that, but every place that I've been, musicians and people in the arts that I've met have always been very welcoming. And I was kind of like the little sister to everyone in the music and theater department at that community college. So I was pretty immediately adopted by some really great people. So it wasn't actually socially challenging. I loved it. Those were some great years.
And did you always know that classical music was your thing? I mean, was there any moments like, no, I want to play rock and roll, or I want to be a country artist, or whatever? Was there ever a moment like that?
I grew up on rock and roll and country, actually. My dad, we commuted to undergrad together when I transferred to Southern Illinois University. So I had 10 hours a week of 100.7 KGMO, classic rock, Cape Girardeau. So I listened to that with my dad. I can play Name That Tune with 70s and 80s rock all day long. And my mom loved classic country, so I know my George Strait very well. Yeah. But I didn't see a career in that because I wanted to always have a steady job that, I have done some songwriting. I actually have an album of songs that I've written on Spotify. It's just called Words because I'm not that creative. But I didn't want to be the front person, or there's a level of vulnerability with that lifestyle. And I've always been more of the studious, let's dive into the research part of things. And I've always been very curious.
Academic part of music.
Yeah, exactly. And I love performing, but I love performing for the purpose of sharing the stories of the composers more than opening up myself, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So moving to Nashville and being a songwriter or singer, that's very intimidating to me. Yeah. So it's kind of made itself clear over the years.
Yeah, that makes sense. And let's dive into the composers that you're interested in a couple minutes. But I wanted to ask you, I've seen you play. Well, I've seen you play a lot. I mean, because on campus, just because playing at events and stuff like that.
Of course.
Yeah, but then also I've seen your chamber group Amadeus Lex, which we should talk about in a little bit.
I would love to. Yeah.
And you play with, and I'm not an expert or anything, but I've seen a lot of music live, and you play with a very you're a very passionate player.
Thank you.
You play with you can sort of feel the energy and emotion coming off of you.
I'm so glad.
Yeah,
That's good.
And so that just adds to the experience, I think. Yeah. Right. On top of the beautiful playing that you do.
Thank you.
What is that like? What is that about? I'm so interested in this idea, and I've talked to other musicians about it, that sense that sort of something is happening, that it's sort of transcendent.
Yeah,
right?
For sure.
You can't explain it.
Yes.
You're moved in a certain way that whether it's the expression on your face or how you're moving on the stool, or where your head is, or where your eyes are closed, that sort of thing. What's going on there? What's that all about?
I mean, obviously it's hard to quantify, but I think every musician will give you a different answer because every musician has a different journey that they've been on with music. My journey is deeply interconnected with my faith. My mom would sing in the church choir and have me on her hip. She'd just be holding me and we'd be singing in the church choir. So I was raised
What kind of church was this?
I grew up in a General Baptist church,
Okay.
Star General Baptist Church.
Yeah,
Just in the country, in the middle of cornfields. Yeah. But I've always had a connection with music and faith. When I was in undergrad, I had a very stressful couple of years studying, tough professors, and things that really kind of shook my confidence and ability to be like, I'm not good enough. And I was always struggling with the fear that I couldn't do it, or I wasn't going to be enough. And that was kind of hammered into me at some level in undergrad. And it kind of took me to a breaking point with music. And I promise this is relevant to, to performance. But it took me to this breaking point in my faith where I had done graduate auditions and I was waiting for results. And it was this point in my life where I thought, Lord, I thought that I was supposed to be a musician. I thought that this was glorifying you. And if this doesn't work out, I don't know what I'm going to do. Because I realized that I had put my entire identity as a person into being a musician, which I think especially when you're in hardcore study mode, especially in your prospective field, that happens very easily.
Sure.
And then if anything comes against you or makes you think that maybe that you're not going to be good enough to fill those shoes that you've placed in front of you, right, it can kind of shake your identity as a whole.
Yeah.
So I had that realization as a teen, and I was at church on a Sunday, and the pastor was saying, if there's anything in your life that the Lord called you to give up and you couldn't do it, that's what you've put your identity in. Mm-hmm. And I remember as a teenager, well, I'm not married. I don't have a husband. I don't have a boyfriend. I don't why is this, convicting me? And I was like, oh, I'm Madeline Rogers, piano. Mm-hmm. That's who I am.
Yeah.
And if I gave that up, I don't know who I would be. Mm-hmm. And so I had to give that to the Lord and say, if I never play another note of piano, scariest prayer I've ever prayed in my life, I know you still love me and I'm your daughter. Mm-hmm. And that's who I can be. And so that was a turning point in my life with performances, because I used to actually have panic attacks before I performed because I had put so much pressure on myself. And after I had kind of walked through this with the Lord, and it took time to kind of heal from some stuff. But now when I perform, I don't have that fear of performance, because it's like music is just sound waves, right? It's just noise.
Yeah.
So the only reason that the noise is impactful for us is that it's divinely created to be. For me.
Yeah.
And I think anytime that I play music, I'm recognizing that fact that the beauty of it doesn't just come from the composer. The beauty of it comes from a God who created us to compose beautiful things.
Right.
So when I play now, it's not because I've got pressure on myself. I play because it's a way for me to glorify the Lord, and it's a way for me to share the gifts that I've cultivated, that He's given me. Yeah,
this resonates with me really deeply. And it's not necessarily the religious piece of it, but this idea that, and everyone in college, and you were young in college, so it was even probably much harder for you. It's like when you're supposed to try to figure out, who am I?
Right.
What am I going to do? What's my life going to be about? What does everything mean? Sort of. And lots of people figure that out in different ways, and maybe not then, maybe later.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I really resonate with is this idea that the art you create, whether it's playing or performing or writing or painting or whatever it is, a lot of artists, I think, when they first start, maybe like you did, over-identify. I am the art and the art is me.
Exactly.
Right. And there's this great quotation from a Russian, I think I've used this before on this podcast, but from a Russian acting teacher.
Yeah.
Stravinsky, maybe his name is? I don't know. That's the composer. I'm not sure. But anyway.
I was like, that's in my world. I got that
world.
one. Yeah.
Anyway, the quote is that love the art in yourself, not yourself in the art.
Ooh.
So in other words, the art is in you and it comes out, right? And that's beautiful. And you love it and you created it. But once it's out there, it's not you anymore, right?
That's true.
It's sort of like has its own identity.
Yeah.
Instead of thinking that every piece you play or everything you write or every painting you paint is you.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds like you came to that at a very early age. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah. And your route was through God, through
Yes.
your faith.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other people, find it in different ways, but that's a great story. I love that. And this idea of those transcendent moments
Yes.
that one can have either interacting with art, whether it be it sometimes it's not even when you're playing. It's like someone like me in the audience is moved so by it.
Yes.
Right? There's something divine about that.
I
think.
agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and you talked before about how important music is to be done collaboratively and with other people and in community.
Yes.
And I feel like those moments can be shared.
Yes.
Right? Have you felt that? Like, have there been moments when you sort of are in a room and performing and have felt this sort of transcendence?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's those goosebump moments. And I always, take a second to be like, oh, yes, Lord, thank you, because, even the ability to recognize that something is divinely created or inspired or, the ability to recognize that and to be able to share it with other people is so special to me.
Yeah.
And those are the moments that I live for when performing.
Right. And then somehow that, it's connecting everybody in that space.
Yeah, for sure.
And in that moment.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about that is that moment, that exact moment, is never going to happen again.
Exactly.
In exactly the same way.
Exactly.
That's why, Madeline, that's why we need to get out and be with each other.
Yeah.
Because those moments don't happen
100%.
on your couch by yourself looking at your phone.
Yes. And I think also you bring up an excellent point because music has changed so much. And in the digital age and with streaming and everything like that, it's so easy to just say, oh, I'll listen to the live stream or, oh, I'll listen to that later.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right that music is meant to be shared in the moment. And it's not necessarily just about the notes. It's about the moment.
Yep.
And it hits everybody differently because everyone's bringing their own experience into that same room and listening to the same thing, but it's all going to hit in different ways.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Absolutely. It's different for everybody. And maybe some people in the room aren't feeling it. Some people are.
Yeah.
But you'll never feel it unless you get out there and interact with everybody else.
I agree.
So let's talk about some of these composers that you're sort of been researching or interested in.
Would love to.
Yeah. So who is somebody that's been sort of, and I think the thing with you is it's sort of, composers were still around. Like, they're not, it's not the old white guys who are dead 200 years ago, right? But like people who are still composing right now. So
absolutely.
Tell us about some of those.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was very blessed to study with Paul Barnes at the University of Nebraska. And he was kind of the first person that opened my eyes to the fact that, hey, if you're a musician, you have the opportunity to work with living composers. And he, as a young man in his career, he met Philip Glass on an airplane. Wow. And he became Philip Glass's pianist. When Philip Glass writes something, Paul plays it, and they have this beautiful working relationship.
One note over and over again, or whatever.
Minimalism, yeah. No, but it's so nice because he has actually been able to commission pieces for Philip Glass to write on subjects or on musical topics that are of interest to him. So he's an Orthodox Christian, so he has sent Greek Orthodox chant from church to Philip Glass that he wrote a string quartet, a piano quintet on. So I mean, there's this idea that composers are just meditating somewhere and they just come out with a piece of music, but it's actually an interactive process, which is kind of beautiful. So Paul introduced me to the composer who I wrote my dissertation about, Victoria Bond. Some of her pieces that I've performed just came out on an album of hers this year, and I've been able to perform her pieces in multiple continents, kind of all over the world, which has been great. Another living composer that I'm very blessed to say is a really good friend of mine is Jonathan Crosmer, who's the violist and founder and co-artistic director of Amadeus Lex. And I've actually had the opportunity to play a piece that he wrote for viola and piano with him on viola. So it's so different. I mean, people think that performers have a piece of music and it's like, oh, well, I guess I better do what the composer wanted. And you have the questions of like, oh, what did they want here? And it's so nice to be like, hey, what do you want here? And you can just interact and create it in the moment. And maybe they'll change their mind. I mean, sometimes you have a composer that's like, oh, actually, I like that idea. Maybe we'll change this here, you know?
So Victoria Bond that you mentioned, how would you characterize her music? What's it like?
Well, my dissertation on her music focused on pieces that were inspired by Byzantine chant. So that's a very specific compositional output of her entire output. But she has a lot of jazz-inspired elements in some of her concertos and pieces. But what I love about Victoria Bond is that she always has rhythmic or melodic elements that are somewhat accessible. You can listen to her music and say, okay, this is probably a modern composition, but it's not going to be inaccessible to listen to. There's always something that pulls you in, whether it's rhythm or melody or something else. Yeah.
And you know, this is making me think about this sort of conundrum, I think it is, of current classical music. Like if you think about the symphony orchestras all over the country, audience declining, audience aging.
Yes.
There was just a big controversy in Boston. The chair of the board of the Boston Symphony Orchestra decided to move on from the current conductor, this guy named Andrew Nelson.
Okay.
Who'd been there for 13, 14 years.
Right.
And ostensibly the reason was because they thought he didn't want to cater to a younger audience or try new things. And I don't know the truth of that, but I think that this is a real issue: is how do we introduce this music to younger people, and so that it's not just, well, I'm going to go sit in this stuffy hall and listen to an orchestra play music written by a German guy 200 years ago.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I don't have an answer, but it seems like you're kind of like working on it a little bit.
I'm working on it in my own way. I certainly don't have answers for the greater classical music. But one of the things that has influenced me so much in my approach to performing these days, because obviously when you're in college, you have to do what college requires you to do.
Sure.
Usually classical students are required to write program notes and not say anything on stage. They walk out, they play, the audience reads the little notes, and then you do your best to kind of piece together what you have. Yeah. In the course of my undergraduate study, when I was still living at home, whenever I would practice, my family would be in the house doing things. I mean, it's kind of hard to ignore a piano that's going on. But my family would be so kind, and they'd ask me questions about what I was playing. And sometimes my dad would just like hang out in the living room while I was practicing and be like, that kind of sounds like this movie from this, or like that kind of sounds like this. And I was actually just prepping music for a recording project. And my parents both were like, those are the first 4 notes of a soap opera. And I was like, what? They're like, that's The Young and the Restless, Madeline. Look it up, And so I look it up and I'm like, oh my gosh, it is. Yeah. Turns out that composer was writing around the same time. And it's like, there's all these connections and all these things that when I would talk to my dad or my parents or my sister about the pieces I was working on, it made it infinitely more interesting to them when they had something cool to think about instead of just, oh, there's some music playing. Yeah. So what I've incorporated in my solo performances, but especially something that my colleagues and I at Amadeus Lex prioritize, is giving the story behind the music, because that's what makes it human, right?
Talk about Amadeus Lex a little bit. What is that? What's your mission? Like, what's that group?
So Amadeus Lex was founded by my friend Jonathan Krosmer, the violist that I was talking about, right after COVID, because larger ensembles were having a hard time getting together and rehearsing. So we usually just keep things to no more than 6 musicians per concert. But basically, the goal of Amadeus Lex is that music is for everyone. Yeah. And our whole goal is to make music as accessible as possible. Yeah. So what we do is we try to plan concerts that are meaningful by bringing the stories of the composers. And we always let our musicians talk about whatever they're passionate about. So they get to tell the story of the piece and the composer, where it came from, maybe like parts of the composer's life that someone wouldn't just get from a Google search, right? Because we all have doctorates in music. We're all always engaging with the research aspect of it. So if we can bring something that enlightens the audience so that they don't have to do the work beforehand or read notes there, it's like, no, you're going to get exactly the story that you might not hear elsewhere, only from here. So we do it that way. And then the other thing that we do is we try to prioritize creating concert spaces that aren't intimidating to go to. I know our campus is pretty nice to park on, but there's a lot of college campuses that are really intimidating when it comes to parking and like, how do I get there? Which door do I enter? And so usually we have all of our concerts in local churches because that's usually easy parking, accessible, ready to go. And it also kind of bridges this town and gown concept of like, hey, I always try to pick churches in Berea that are walking distance for my students to attend. And then it also involves the community. So the students are not just interacting with the music, they're also getting out into the community and experiencing it in a different way, like you were saying, like as it should be experienced with other people.
Yeah, and I think, so I've seen a couple of the Amadeus Lex concerts, and I think, as you were saying, the fact that you guys talk about each piece before you play it, in some detail, actually.
Quite a bit of detail.
Yeah, giving history and also making connections to sort of present day and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Letting us know when the composer lived, maybe what the circumstances of his or her
100%.
life was, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it brings it alive in this way that it doesn't feel like an artifact.
Yes, exactly.
Because classical music sometimes feels like it's of the past, right? It's something dusty we pull out of and listen to.
Exactly. Exactly.
And put it back away, and it's not a really living, breathing thing.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of composers that, to me, are very exciting. So, for example, the last concert that we did just like a couple weeks ago, so March of 2026, this is, my violinist of our group, Scylla Darville, she's the professor of violin at EKU. She was telling me about this Polish composer who was amazing. And I have taught a class on women composers. I've taken several classes on women composers, and I still hadn't heard of this woman. I think this is the exciting part for me, is that there's so much history that we have not even discovered from like the recent past, even 20th century. And she was telling me, she's like, this lady's awesome. You got to go listen to this piano quintet. So I listened to it, and this is by Bachevitz, is her name. So I listened to this piano quartet, and I was so, like, immediately drawn into the music. It's like all of the elements that I look for in a classical music piece, which is like rhythmic intensity, like accessibility for the listener, to where it's not so academic that you can't understand it, but still edgy enough where it's interesting for the musicians too. It's like this perfect balance of things. And I was like, where has this woman been? Like, what is going on? And so Luke and Scylla did quite a bit of research on her. And, you know, Luke, our cellist, gave a really beautiful introduction when we played it. And it turns out that she was immensely respected when she was alive. And even Dmitri Shostakovich, one of the most, like, prolific composers of the 20th century, Russian composer, he was quoted to say that she was the best living composer at that time. And he was like immensely depressed when she died. But history books wrote about him and they didn't write about her. And this is a recurring theme. And that's why it's exciting, because these aren't just artifacts. When we revive works that have been played and forgotten, this is actually keeping history alive and allowing it to extend into the present day, and to even address some of the issues of like, are there so many composers who weren't well represented throughout history, who have pieces that have never been played, you know? So
there's probably a lot.
Oh, it's incredible. And this is what gets me excited. Like, I was in Argentina last month recording an album, and I got to meet some representatives of the Argentinian composers' archives. I got to go to the archives, and I saw these manuscripts from 1919 of pieces that haven't been played since they were written in 1919. So it's just, it's unrelenting overwhelming amounts of information and music that haven't been heard.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's a common problem in a lot of sort of genres and issues. Like so my wife has an English PhD, and her dissertation had to do with literature in the 18th century. And what she discovered, one of the things she discovered was there was a lot of women novelists in the 18th century who at the time were quite popular and quite well read, and forgotten about, completely forgotten about today.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. For whatever reason. I mean, we can argue about what that might be, but and I think bringing them back alive is awesome. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about. There's another composer you mentioned, H. Leslie Adams.
Yes.
Talk about him a little bit.
Well, this is more of a story than necessarily anything else, but if you really want to talk about it, we should, right?
Yeah.
So when I was finishing up my doctorate, I was working with a colleague, classmate of mine who played the French horn. And one of the pieces that we had performed by a living composer got put on this list on the internet. So he sent me the link. He's like, hey, we got put on this website as an example video of this piece. I'm like, oh, that's cool. So I checked it out, and it said like 20 pieces that every horn player should know. Mm-hmm. And so I'm scrolling through, and I saw the video that we did, and I was like, oh, this is so nice. And 19 out of the 20 examples had either an audio file where you could listen to the piece or a video where you could watch the piece being played, so that performers could listen and figure out if they wanted to play it or not. Except for one. There was one that didn't, and it said H. Leslie Adams, Empire Sonata for horn and piano. I'm like, Empire? Like, is this Star Wars? Like, what's going on? And so I started researching because that ignited my curiosity of why isn't there a video or audio? Was this overlooked? Like a typo? So I start looking, and I can't find a recording anywhere. Yeah. And I'm using all my resources. Can't find anything. I did find the score for purchase. So I told my horn player friend, I'm like, let's learn this thing, So we buy the score, and it is massive. Yeah. It is like 40 minutes long. And that makes a horn player get very scared with the chops, Oh my God. But we start looking through it, and as I start playing it, I'm like, this is gorgeous. Mm-hmm. And it was written in 1960, and I couldn't find out anything about it. I couldn't find anything about the premiere. I started just searching and searching and searching. And what I discovered was that there were a lot of wrong notes in the score. Oh. And so this was really a problem because this composer had a very lyrical, kind of neo-romantic style. And everything was so consonant and beautiful that when there was a wrong note, you would be like, that's got to be wrong. Yeah. This guy seems very, like, not super dissonant, not super, like, pushing the boundaries.
So just when they printed the score, they did it incorrectly.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly. Yeah. So I reached out to the people who had printed the score, which is the American Composers Alliance, and I was like, hey, I'm playing this piece. I think some notes are wrong. Do you have a manuscript that I can, like, check with? Yeah. And I had a really wonderful contact there, Gina Genova. She sent me the score. And some of the places that had notes that I thought were wrong were wrong. They were correct in the manuscript, wrong in the printed edition, a few of them. But a lot of them were actually wrong in the manuscript, too. I was like, how do I solve this? Yeah. So I kept digging, and I ended up finding, let's see, how many manuscripts? I found a manuscript in the Library of Congress. I found another manuscript in the Cleveland Library Archives from 1963.
And when you say manuscript, these are just handwritten
scores. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I found a different manuscript that was from American Composers Edition that was supposedly revised in 1980. Then I found a random publication of one of the movements that was only available in Australia. So I was going nuts because all of them were slightly different. Yeah. And I thought the only way to settle this is if I could just talk to the composer himself. Yeah. And he was born in 1932. So I was like, the odds of him...
Time's running out.
Yeah, the odds of him even answering an email. I couldn't even find an email for him. Right. And it took me probably 3 or 4 months reaching out to like massive amounts of people. I think I sent 183 emails to do the research that I've done on this piece. And someone that had interviewed him for a radio thing sent me his phone number. Wow. It was a landline in Cleveland. Yeah. And I called on a Sunday afternoon, and he thought I was a telemarketer, but he picked up the phone, and he was like, hello? And I was like, hi, like, I want to play your horn sonata. He's like, I don't want to buy anything. I'm like, no, I'm a musician. I'm like, is this Dr. Adams? And we started talking, and he was so excited.
Yeah,
and I said, I'm pretty sure these notes are wrong. I don't know what to do. Can I send you the notes? And he was like, you can just come by. And he was in Cleveland. Yeah. So I packed up the car and I drove to Cleveland, and I sat next to him at a piano, and I went over I had like 65 questions on that score of notes that were wrong. And I got an updated version published with the ACA. So now that's corrected.
That's amazing.
And then I went back to Cleveland the following January. I got to play that piece for him in the audience. And that was just a few months before he passed away.
Yeah.
But that was actually the first time he had ever heard it, because it hadn't been played since 1962.
What a great story.
Thank you.
I mean, and you're not, what that says is you're much more than a musician. You're a scholar of this music, and trying to bring, a lot of it back to life.
That's exactly what I want to do.
And you're an amazing player, and I think there's a piece we can play that is composed by H. Leslie Adams,
yes,
right?
It is. It is. So H. Leslie Adams is more well known for his vocal music. So some of my voice colleagues know his pieces for voice and piano and that sort of thing. But what I discovered through the experience with the horn sonata is that there's a bunch of pieces that have been overlooked for instrumentals. So there's a horn sonata, there's a violin sonata, there's a cello sonata, which this would be from, and then there were also several piano pieces that have never been heard. And I've just finished recording those, so those will be coming out on an album soon. But my next recording project will be to get the cello and violin sonata recorded with my friends with Amadeus Lex.
So the piece we're going to play is you and
Luke Darville
on the cello.
Yes.
And what's the title of the piece?
This is the second movement from Sonata for Cello and Piano by H. Leslie Adams.
Awesome.
And this has only been heard once or twice.
All right, let's listen. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
It was great to listen to you play and hear this composer who you have helped, bring back to attention.
Thank you.
Just amazing. Yeah. So this journey for you is really interesting, Madeline. I mean, it's so textured, right? So you
Right.
play beautifully and you perform all over the world, but you're also someone who is interested in understanding, the history of the music and how you can bring it back to life. So what's kind of, you're very young, so what are you thinking about, the next phase for you? Is it continuing to perform as much as you can, or sort of what does that look like for you?
Well, I mean, no one can predict exactly what happens. The thing that I have really enjoyed in recent years and coming to Berea is being able to teach. And I always knew that I would be teaching piano, but I actually never thought that I would have an opportunity to teach about this subject that I'm passionate about, like finding these composers and kind of bringing their works back to light. But one of the required writing courses at Berea College was given to my care, and I chose Finding a Voice Through Classical Music as the title. But what it is discovering women composers who have never been heard. So after this podcast, I'll be going back to my office to grade 16 research papers. And each of those 16 research papers is of a woman composer who has been lost to time. Yeah. And so it's not only in my own personal life discovering pieces and going to archives and doing this research, but it's also being able to kind of inspire young people to be interested in classical music. And I've been able to do that through this class. Mm-hmm. And I've had so many students come to me before the class and they'll say, Dr. Rogers, I don't know anything about music. I don't think I should be in this class. I don't think it's going to be the right fit for me. And I say, just wait it out, because it's not going to be what you think. And the beautiful thing about it is that I have so many international students that a lot of them pick composers who are from their home country or meaningful to their family heritage. And they start discovering things. And for example, one of my students this semester, this is a bit dark, but she discovered that the composer that she's writing about, that composer's father, this was in the 1800s, was murdered by a guy that was very close to where she grew up in Costa Rica. Oh, so it's there's all these crazy connections. Yeah. And when they start diving in and researching, a lot of times I plan a concert for them to come and attend with Amadeus Lex, and they're starting to get excited about classical music. Maybe they'll keep loving it. Maybe they'll be like, this was just a phase, but at least they're introduced to it in a more personal way because they're the ones doing the research. Right.
And what a gift for these kids to have you there helping them with this. And it's been striking me as you've been talking, there's the old stereotype, right, of the classical music teacher.
Yes.
Who is strict and probably older. And, I'll give you an example. So my son, when he was growing up, he took some piano lessons, and we lived in this town outside of Boston where there were a lot of Russian people lived.
Yes.
And so there was all these Russian piano teachers.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
a whole Russian school. And so he went to this house where it was all Russian piano teachers.
Yeah.
And this is not knock on Russian people. That's not what I mean. But they were very intense, and and he was intimidated.
Yeah.
He was very young, but
yeah.
he was intimidated and scared, and a lot of the time, and it sort of turned him off to playing into that kind of music.
Yeah.
But here you are. It's such a contrast. I mean. You're the girl next door. I mean, you really are. You could be someone's friend who lives next door.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're not going to wrap their knuckles with a ruler if they get a note wrong, right?
I have yet to do that.
And it's just I'm sure it really helps to connect. Your style and your way helps to connect these kids to this music that they might not otherwise, maybe they don't relate to it. Right?
I hope so. That's the goal. And it's not just because I'm passionate about it and I'm just sharing what I think, but I genuinely believe that there's so many composers who really deserve to be paid attention to now and to be part of bringing that back to life. I'm working right now with the internship office to see if one of my students can help Amadeus Lex to get scores that are only found in manuscript form in archives to get them published.
Great project, yeah.
Yeah, because why not?
Right.
Why not? Because there's no way that people can play them until they've gone through that process. So yeah, it's not just because I like it. I really genuinely believe it's it's important.
Yeah.
And,
So we're going to kind of wrap this up a little bit. So maybe this is a hard question. I don't know. But let's say there's somebody who is, doesn't know much about classical music, but really enjoys live performance.
Yeah.
And where do they start? Like, where would you say, like, who's somebody I should listen to if I'm kind of new to this kind of music and I want to connect with it and I want to, where would you point them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, selfishly, I would be like, come to an Amadeus Lex concert.
Yeah, they should definitely do that. Yeah.
I hope so. Yeah, we're planning our next season for next year, and it's going to be so much fun.
Yeah.
Because you will have an opportunity to hear probably composers who are underrepresented. You'll probably have an opportunity to hear things by living composers. But the thing that I like about being able to plan our own concerts is that we can pair them with the classics, because current composers wouldn't have the musical influence that they have without the classics. And I think that can be a little bit of a divide for someone who's trying to get into classical music, where we have this thing where it's like, okay, I only want to listen to new stuff. I don't want to listen to the people who came before.
Right.
But they still have a place. They still have importance.
Sure.
And so I would say for someone who's new to classical music, like, don't be afraid to listen to new, to listen to old, and to also just be curious. I think that's where it all starts, is if you're curious, maybe you look up a list of women composers. Maybe there's tons of playlists online of that genre of music, which can span from symphonies to small piano pieces to, there's a giant range.
Right.
So to be curious, and I would also say, like, find something you're passionate about, or find something that relates to you. If you're interested in a country, go and listen to composers from that country. I think the thing about classical music is that it's very worldwide, and people say music is an international language, but in working with musicians from all over the world, I think it is kind of true. So,
yeah. Sure. And I think, one of the things that I think is hard for some people who don't know much about classical music, and I think I felt this when I was younger, is that, like, where do I enter? I feel like I'm supposed to know things and understand things, and who is this and where they're from, and, like, where did that music come from?
Right.
And, like, you're supposed to have some kind of, like, knowledge of it that you learned somewhere, who knows where.
Right.
And you don't, so you feel like, oh, that's not for me.
Right.
But as we were just talking about earlier, you can be as moved by a very expressive, emotional classical piece as you might be by anything else.
Exactly.
As you might be by a gospel song.
Yes.
Or as you might be by a rock song
100%.
that you're really grooving with, right?
Yeah.
So if you don't think of it as much as an intellectual exercise, as I think some people think that's what it is.
Yes.
I think that helps to sort of get over that barrier.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's really easy to see classical music, as, like, background music or too intellectual for me to understand music. And what we definitely tried to do at Amadeus Lex, and any time that I perform, is to kind of bridge that gap and say, especially with modern composers, there's tons of jazz elements. There's some, like, even pop elements, or, like, there's things that you can relate to and to listen to, and it doesn't have to be stuffy, you know?
Yeah.
So trying to bridge that gap through live performance, I think, is the best stepping stone.
Yeah.
Because you get that experience of being together,
right,
and experiencing those moments together.
And you were the very opposite of stuffy. So I think that's you're a great way to sort of inspire people to.
I'm so glad.
Listen to classical music and get more into it. And Madeline, I just really want to thank you for this time and this conversation. It's been a ton of fun for me.
Oh, it's been very fun for me too. Thank you for letting me talk about what I want to talk about.
What I Really Want to Talk About is produced and recorded in the studios of Berea College News and Radio in Berea, Kentucky. You can learn more about this podcast and listen to all of the previous episodes at whatIreallywantotalkabout.com. My contact information is on the website, so please get in touch with me if there's something that you really want to talk about. I'm Tim Monroe. Thanks for listening.